welcome back to Yulan's channel, studying neuroscience with Yulan, and we'll continue our journey in the AP Psychology. And if you haven't watched my previous videos on AP Psych, on Unit 1, the scientific foundation of psychology, and previous subunits of videos on biological basis of behavior, please watch it. So yeah, let's begin on today's journey on neural firing. So here are the key vocab for this video. 1. Neuron, myelin sheaths, threshold, neurotransmitters, agonist, dendrites, action potential, our non-response, reuptake, antagonist, axons, refractory period, synapse, and endorphins. So, neurons are our body's nerve cells, which you may already know, which make up the nervous system. For a neuron to fire or communicate with another neuron, information must first be gathered in by the dendrites of the receiving neuron. From there, the information passes through the cell body to the axon. So, dendrite, there are a couple key pieces or key things that make up the neuron. The first one is dendrite, which receives information and transfers into the cell body. And then we have cell body, which is also known as soma, and it's the neuron support center. It's like the nucleus, like the part that contains nucleus. And then we have axon. Axon passes messages to its terminal branches. The neural impulse goes through the axon and is an electrical signal. And then we have myelin sheaths, which is a layer of tissue that covers the axon and speeds up neural impulses. Without the myelin sheaths, there's a loss of muscle control. Myelin sheaths is like the thing that covers the wire, so that like you can actually touch the wire rather than you actually touch the electrical signal. Yeah. And also it makes it the electric signal travels more faster. And finally, we have the axon's terminal branches, and it passes on chemical messages to other cells and parts of the body. So now there's a really key concept called action potential, and you definitely need to know this for AP Psych, but you don't need remember, you don't need to know all the steps of it, because that's more like the AP biology content. However, try to know what each step of the graph means, and the graph is shown here, like this one. And because it can come up as the MCQ, multiple choice questions, and just understand what each section of the graph means and its significance, and you will be good to go. Basically, the action potential is associated with depolarization. Depolarization is the process that carries the neural impulse through the axon. Action potential is what must happen for the process to occur. So action potential must occur for the message to continue to travel down the axon. This only occurs if the neuron's threshold has been met, meaning it has received enough stimulation from the original sending neuron. If this threshold is met, the action potential occurs and the message travels down the axon via a process of depolarization, just as I mentioned. If the threshold is not met, nothing happens. Neurons have an all or none response. They either fire or they don't. So here's the all or non response. And it usually occurs through the relocation of ions. At resting state, the neuron has a negative, which is negative 70 MV charge. The negative ions are inside the neuron, while positive ions are outside the neuron. So there's like this imbalance of ions and the charge between the inside and outside of the neuron. The specific neuron receives neurotransmitters. More of this explained later. Think of it as a signal. When enough of this signal is received, meaning it's a threshold, the membrane of the neuron becomes permeable, allowing the positive ions to rush into the neuron, which means the ions, the positive and negative charges between the inside and outside are kind of balanced, bringing the charge of the cell to about plus 40 MV. When the charge changes, the series of signaling occurs within the neuron like a bullet. The speed of this electric message fire is actually 120 meters per second, which is about 270 mph, which is incredible. It's unimaginable. I forgot to mention, there are two types of neurotransmitters basically. The first one is excitatory, and then we have inhibitory. As the name suggests, as excited and inhibited. Excitatory neurotransmitters pushes neurons. It's like neurons accelerator, and it makes the neuron more likely to fire and reach its action potential, and inhibitory neurons work the other way, the opposite way, and it's like the neurons break and makes it less likely for a neuron to fire. And now we have terminal branches. Remember those neurotransmitters that we just mentioned? Well, once the message has passed down through the axon, it reaches the terminal branches. The terminal branches of a neuron contain neurotransmitters which are then released. These neurotransmitters cross the synaptic gaps between neurons and are gathered by the dendrites of a new neuron, continuing the communication process. The synapse is where two neurons meet and neurotransmitters are released into it. There is both an electrical synapse, which relays quick messages to another cell, and a chemical synapse, which sends messages slowly to another cell. Neurotransmitters are stored in the vesicles in the axon terminal, and when there's a neuron impulse, the vesicle binds with the edge of the axon terminal, and the neurotransmitters are released into the synaptic cleft. Neurotransmitters that do not find a home on the dendrites of a neuron are absorbed back into the original neuron through a process called reuptake. This will also come up sometimes. So here are some key neurotransmitters you need to know for this exam. Let's introduce neurotransmitters a little bit first. So neurotransmitters often act as agonists or antagonists in our body. An antagonist neurotransmitter binds to the dendrites of a neuron and prevents or blocks its response. An example of this is the poison botulinum. Botulinum causes paralysis because it blocks the release of acetylcholine, an important neurotransmitter in muscle action, which is also mentioned here, like the first one. Agonists, on the other hand, bind to receptor sites and mimic the effects of a specific neurotransmitter. So please remember, antagonist binds to the dendrites and prevents or blocks its response completely, whereas agonist just mimics the response or like how the effects of a specific neurotransmitter. Opiates are an example of an agonist as they mimic the effects of endorphins in our body, which is why they produce a morphine-like effect. Drugs trick our brain into thinking that they are neurotransmitters. As mentioned previously, drugs mimic the effects of endorphins so much to the point that our brain stops producing natural endorphins, which causes huge problems. This is why there is such a withdrawal when people stop trying these drugs, because your brain has already adapted to when you are taking the drugs, and when you stop taking those, it's really hard to get rid of it. The brains of a long-term drug user can not just produce something significant for your health anymore because of the way drugs trick our brain. So this chart shows the functions of some key neurotransmitters. It's really good to memorize this since it's sometimes tested on, and it usually comes up with like so it's like a scenario, or like, yeah, it's usually a scenario, and it describes like how the person's affected by some kind of drugs or neurotransmitters, and then you need to find out which type is it. So first we have acetylcholine, abbreviated as ACH, and it enables muscle action, learning, and memory. Together with So Alzheimer's disease, one major cause is ACH producing neurons deteriorate. And then we have dopamine, and this will come up in the test a lot as well, and you also heard it in daily lives. And it influences movement, learning, attention, and emotion. And oversupply leads to schizophrenia, whereas undersupply leads to tremors and decreased mobility in Parkinson's disease. So Parkinson's and schizophrenia are those two neurological disease or disorders that will come up when we later talk about like the disorders. And then we have serotonin, and it affects mood, hunger, sleep, and arousal. And undersupply leads to depression. Antidepressant drugs raise serotonin levels. And then we have norepinephrine, and it helps control alertness and arousal. And undersupply can depress mood. And then we have GABA. You don't really need to know what's the full name of GABA is, just remember GABA, and it's a major inhibitory neurotransmitter, and undersupply can lead to seizures, tremors, and insomnia. And second last one is glutamate, and is a major excitatory neurotransmitter, and it involved in memory. And oversupply stimulates the brain, and migraines and seizures, while lots of people avoid MCG in their food. And finally, we have endorphins, and it diminishes the perception of pain and acts as a natural sedative. Undersupply can cause depression, anxiety, and moodiness. So after firing, After a neuron fires and reaches action potential, it goes into its refractory period, where it cannot fire anymore. This period of rest prevents one signal from combining with another. The neuron becomes slightly more negative than negative 70 MV during this period. After its refractory period, the neuron comes back to negative 70 MV, and the neuron reaches the resting potential, while the cell is polarized and ready to fire again once it reaches threshold. So as you can see here, this is the resting state, and now it suddenly depolarized and reaches plus 40, and then it repolarization and drops below negative 70, which is the hyperpolarization section, and then it slowly comes up and return back to the resting state. So yeah, that's the end of our this video. So thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe if you really enjoyed it.